That is the wrong document. Giving our editor work to do here. And all right, here we go. Jenna Moreci is author of the #1 best-selling books, The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister. She also has a YouTube channel called Writing with Jenna Moreci, where she helps current and aspiring authors to not only finish the books that live in their heads, but also get those books published and seen. Her channel sits at 268,000 subscribers and has over 26 million total channel views. She has incredibly popular videos, such as Top 10 Pet Peeves in Fictional Romances, 10 Worst Tropes in Fantasy Genre Fiction, How to Create a Character Profile, How to Write Romantic Chemistry, and so much more. This is, of course, the Video Creator Show, where we show you how to turn your YouTube dreams into a lucrative reality. I'll be talking with Jenna today about how she has been able to marry her writing career with her YouTube success. Jenna, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm stoked to talk to you because so you are an author. I think you're the first big published author that I've spoken with on here today. I've of course talked to people who have written nonfiction books and things of that sort, but I'm excited to speak with you because you seem to be in kind of a unique place. So, did your books precede your YouTube channel? Like, what came first?
The YouTube channel definitely came first. I was in that situation of trying to build an author platform. Basically, you know, there are millions upon millions of books out there, and it's unrealistic, to say the least, to expect someone to just stumble upon your book and buy it. So I knew I had to create an author platform of some kind. I started off with the route most authors go, which was blogging. And I realized that I hate blogging and I don't enjoy it at all. And a lot of people told me, you know, Jenna, you have a really good personality. You give good writing advice. Why don't you turn that into a YouTube channel? And at first I was very, very against the idea of being an introvert. I was like, there's no way I'm putting my face on the internet. But eventually life changed, things changed, and I came around and I started the YouTube channel basically to create an author platform for myself so I could, you know, help sell the books that I was writing. And long story short, it ended up working out really well.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like some people, they probably have that idea too. They want to write books and they're like, maybe I could use YouTube to kind of get an audience and then I could sell books more easily by having this audience. Like, was there a hesitation in starting this channel? Because maybe since you hadn't written or finished your books yet, did you feel like you were dealing with imposter syndrome? Or I'm sure you had plenty of writing under your belt as is, but was that something you dealt with kind of leading up to this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, people had been telling me for over a year that I should start a YouTube channel before I even decided to entertain the idea. There was no way I was going to do it. First of all, I felt like, well, yes, I've been into writing and I've been studying the craft of writing since I was 6 years old. So I had a couple of decades worth of experience. I had short stories and poetry published and stuff like that. So I knew it was one of those things where logically and mentally, I knew that I was qualified, but emotionally there's that fear of well, I don't have a novel out. So will people feel the same way? There's always that hesitation. And just in general, you know, it's scary to be a woman on YouTube, you know, I mean, it's scary to be anyone on YouTube, but especially, you know, as a female, there's lots of, you know, really creepy guys in the comments. And I was scared about that. I was scared about putting my face on the internet. There was so much about the whole process that was a big no for me. The only reason I changed my mind is we kind of went through a sort of a family disaster. My fiance had a major injury and just to put it bluntly, he broke his spine. And you don't go through something like that and it not kind of change your perspective on life and change how you view things. And it sort of kind of allowed me to see that, you know, my time on this planet is impermanent. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. And it makes you a little bit more prone to taking risks. And it's like, you know, I could die tomorrow. What do I have to lose? So that's ultimately the reason I started the YouTube channel. Is I was like, you know what? Everyone's telling me that I'd be good at this. I hate blogging. My author platform isn't growing with, the different methods that I'm trying right now. What have I got to lose? I'm just going to give it a shot. And my goal was 100 subscribers. And 268,000 subscribers later, I think it's safe to say I achieved the goal. So it worked out.
Yeah, what is that, like a 10,000x or something?
Something
Probably more than that. I'm bad at arithmetic, on the spot at least.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like, if I just get triple digits, I will feel successful. So I literally had no idea it would get as big as it got. Literally no idea at all.
So, like, when you first started making videos, how long did it take for you to publish your first book after you had kind of accumulated some success on YouTube?
I think about 6 months. I think I had about 10,000 subscribers by the time that I published my first book, which, in the grand scheme of YouTube, 10,000 subscribers doesn't really sound like a whole lot. But with that subscriber base, I was able to make writing my full-time job just, off of my debut novel, which is relatively, like, it's practically unheard of. It's very uncommon. A very small percentage of authors can make writing their full-time job, period, let alone off their debut. And so that just goes to show you don't need to be wildly famous on YouTube. The 10,000 subscribers that I had, that translated into the book sales that I needed to make writing my career.
And yeah, as you said, 10,000 subscribers isn't a ton in like compared to a lot of people on YouTube. Right. However, I think one thing that you really have going for you in your videos is, you're very charismatic, you know what you're talking about, and you come across as somebody who people want to listen to. And you, I think, have a loyal audience. And, I'm not just trying to butter you up here. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels, and I can tell your audience pays attention to you. You're not just like, for me, so my channel was basically, and still is, a lot of, it was kind of faceless, especially in the beginning, where I was proud of the videos. They were really good, in my opinion. A lot of people thought so too, but they didn't really know me. I feel like your audience, they feel like they know you on some level. So when you actually did come out with a book, they were much more willing to actually give it a chance.
Yeah, I think that's a big asset on YouTube, is being authentic, being yourself. That was something that I struggled with at first. I was trying really hard to be professional and, like that, I don't know, stereotypical professional author type. And that's just not me. I'm a goofball. I swear like a sailor. It's just not my personality. And when I started off that way, my videos weren't performing well. So I just basically got to a point where I was like, fuck it, no one's watching these anyway. I'm just going to be myself and be sarcastic and sassy and whatever. No one's here. No one cares. So I'll just do that. And it was literally right when I started doing that my channel completely took off. And I was like, oh, okay, so that was the secret all along. I just had to stop pretending to be someone that I wasn't. So yeah, I mean, it ended up working out for me. And it's funny to me because I've always considered myself kind of eccentric and a weirdo. And I didn't really think people would want to watch the channel if I was being my authentic self. So it was kind of validating in a way that it's like, oh, I can be a weirdo and people still like me. So that's cool. That's sweet.
Oh, yeah. And especially on YouTube, it's all about personality. And it's funny. I've sort of tried to fill the YouTuber stereotype role as well. And, it just kind of didn't go super well. I love that as soon as you started just kind of being yourself on camera, that's when it started to take off. Did you also feel that filming was just way easier too? Like you felt less drained after, maybe even energized after talking to a camera?
Well, I'll be honest, I never feel energized after filming, but just because I'm an introvert. So it's like all that talking. Also, I film in bulk, so it'll be like 5 videos in one day. I'm exhausted at the end. I'm super tired at the end of it, but it did become a lot easier because I stopped trying to sugarcoat things. I stopped trying to beat around the bush. I'm just like a naturally blunt, curt person. And once I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to talk that way and tell people like, stop making excuses about your writing, or, stop pretending that your characters are misbehaving. And that's why you can't get the book done. I just leaned into it, and it made it a lot easier to prepare my videos because I was just going to talk the way I always talk. I wasn't, putting on a persona or an act that I had to try and, find the right words for. So it definitely made the process quicker and easier.
Nice, yeah, and that's one thing I always tell people is it's gonna save you time, like it's gonna save you energy, and totally worth it. And it's more likely that you will succeed if you do that. So props to you. I'm super glad that you've presented your real self to the YouTube people.
Thank
It's
you.
yeah, and it's always refreshing too. I think a lot of people, they're stuck in a cubicle or something and feel like they can't really say exactly what they want to say. So when they see somebody else saying what they want to say without holding back, I think it's refreshing. It's the world kind of needs that.
Yeah, also when it comes to writing advice specifically, and this was one of the reasons that I started the channel, when it comes to writing advice specifically, a lot of writers just really love to hear themselves talk, and they're very pedantic and they just ramble endlessly, and it's all this purple prose. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not that serious. Like, calm down, cut the crap, you know? And so I would look for writing advice for myself, and I would just see all this rambly nonsense, and it's like, like they're just defining what a climax is. It's not that serious or hard to define. It shouldn't take an essay. So for me, I wanted to create like a no bullshit channel, like just cut the crap, get to the point, give the honest facts, and explain it concisely and in a way that's easy to understand. Because a lot of the aspects of writing, it's people overcomplicate it. It's not as complicated as a lot of people present it to be. So that was part of the whole thing with my channel is I'm just gonna get to the point, give people the answer and move on.
And so I noticed a lot of your videos are kind of like top 10 or 10 worst male character pet peeves, 10 worst female character pet peeves. And then, of course, you have a lot of like how-tos, how to write a plot twist, how to write physical descriptions, things like this. So how do you come up with these video topics? Because video topics are crucially important on YouTube. And I think this is a part of the reason why you've reached some success. Like, how does your brain work with this stuff?
Well, first of all, like I said, I've been wanting to be an author since I was 6 years old, and I'm 35, so that's pretty much like 30 years of analyzing storytelling. I was that little kid who I'd watch a movie and I'd be like, okay, that's the rising action and that's the climax. Like I've literally been studying it my whole life. So for me, there are endless topics that I could talk about, not just in writing, but also in reading. Those are kind of the tropes that I talk about, my least favorite and favorite tropes. Publishing, marketing. I actually find the publishing and marketing side of writing extremely fascinating and interesting. I have a business background, so I'm all into that stuff. So for me, it's super easy to come up with topics. Right now, I have a spreadsheet of potential topics, and I think it's at 150, and it just keeps growing. Wow. Another thing is I ask for recommendations. I ask my audience what they're interested in. If you follow me on Patreon, I have a whole tier devoted to a suggestion box. So I regularly take their suggestions because obviously they're suggesting it. That's what they want to watch. So I regularly take their suggestions and then I dedicate the video to them. And also every 6 months, I go through my channel and I check for trends. I check to see which topics people are preferring over others. And I try to cater my future topics toward, which topics are getting the most views, which sort of general ideas do people want to learn more about? Because at the end of the day, this is to help them, So I want my content to be directed to them. So I have my list of 150 video topics, but if I see, tropes are performing better, or people want to know more of the basics of storytelling, I will go to that spreadsheet and then I will look for the topics that sort of fit those trends. And then that's what I will sort of cater my next few months toward.
So clearly you're quite analytical.
Yeah.
I saw you used to be an accountant, before you went full-time writing in YouTube. So clearly like numbers and kind of keeping things straight in your mind goes well for you. It sounds like you look at your YouTube analytics pretty extensively. Would you say that's true? Like, do you spend a lot of time kind of looking at the numbers, or is it just kind of like, this video has a lot of views, cool, I'll do more like it?
Well, I used to look at it very extensively. Now that I have gotten bigger, I have, and I can afford to outsource. I do have, an assistant, and now she does most of the analytics checking and then, checking in with me. But like I said, like about every 6 months, I do like to do what I call a YouTube spree cleaning, where I just go through and get a general idea of the types of videos that tend to be performing the best and the ones that are kind of, not really doing as well. And kind kind of get that general idea. But thank God for my assistant, because there are so many things that I have to do. It's really nice having her now, and she does the hardcore analytics, and she'll create spreadsheets and charts and graphs for me. And I'm just like, thank you so much, because I don't have as much time for this anymore.
Right on. Yeah, it can be really helpful to just have somebody look at the numbers and kind of explain what it all means. I've never been much of a numbers guy. You know, I can do something like your kind of every 6 months spring cleaning, so to speak. I'm definitely capable of that. But the hardcore analytics, I always love the meetings when somebody has compiled like a PowerPoint and they're showing me the graphs and everything is like kind of laid out for me.
Right.
It just everything seems so obvious when that happens. Whereas before, it kind of feels like I don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, even with my own channel or you know, a channel I'm working with or something. And so yeah, I think it's great you've reached a point where you can hire an assistant. That seems to be sort of important for taking things to the next level for a lot of people.
Right, completely. And it was one of those things where I'm a control freak. I like to be in control of everything. And it was my fiance who was like, Jenna, you've got so much, you have so many obligations, just outsource something. You know, I finally did it, and he was totally right. I should have done it years ago. But yeah, she's a lifesaver.
Right on. Yeah. So I see when I look at your descriptions, you have lots of links, affiliate links, links to your books, all kinds of links. So is this kind of like the main way that you've monetized your YouTube channel, through affiliate links? Basically, I think it's always interesting to talk about the business aspect of YouTube. So are those links the main way that you monetize your channel, or like how do you make money off of this? If you don't mind me asking.
Oh, that's totally fine. I definitely diversify my income. I recommend that to all writers and all YouTubers and all writer YouTubers as well. I totally diversify my income. I would say in terms of YouTube, the bulk of my income comes from sponsorships. You know, just giving a sponsored shout out at the start of a video. I would say if you are going that route with YouTube, at least this is my personal opinion, I don't accept sponsorships unless it's like a company that I actually use and is relevant to my platform. So for example, I have gotten sponsorship offers that were companies I totally loved and I would absolutely love to be sponsored by, but it has absolutely nothing to do with writing. So I'm kind of like, that would just look weird if all of a sudden I was like, by the way, guys, this video is sponsored by an underwear company. Like, it just has no relevance whatsoever to writing. So I keep it specific to my target audience, which is writers and readers. So lots of bookish sponsorships. And I only, like I said, select sponsors that I use myself and I can ethically recommend, because otherwise I just think it's kind of crappy to do that to your audience if you don't even like the company. So that would be probably a bulk of my YouTube income. Next would be, you know, the ad revenue. I do have the affiliate links. A lot of my affiliate links are also people who sponsor me or companies that I do use regularly and recommend all the time. But I wouldn't say they're like top tier of the income I make, but my primary income source, the one that makes up the biggest percentage, would be my book sales. And what I like about YouTube is I mention at the start and the end of all of my videos, hey guys, don't forget I got the Savior series going out. And it's not only is it free marketing and advertising for my books, but it's advertising I'm actually getting paid for. So it works out in that way. And that way I have a steady stream of income for my book sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and clearly that has worked out. Like I think a lot of people, it seems, they publish books and they just sort of expect them to get noticed if they're good enough. I know you've talked about this in some of your videos where that just isn't necessarily true. There's so many books out there that get published every day. You do need a way to stand out. And one thing I did want to ask you, so I think mindset is important here. So for those who maybe are thinking about writing a book, what was it like to have a book in your head? And I know there was like a big life event for you that kind of shifted your perspective on things, but how long did you have the idea for the Savior series before you actually like started working on it seriously?
That in particular is sort of a unique situation. To be clear, the Savior series wasn't my debut. My first book was a science fiction novel, and that the moment I got the idea, I started writing it. And it took me about 5 years since it was my debut novel. And then it took me about 5 years to write it. The next book was The Savior's Champion. And that one, ironically, I had the idea for it. The way I come up with ideas is I typically listen to music. And whenever I listen to music, it kind of creates a story in my mind. I used to call them mental music videos. And I had one for the song Head Like a Hole by 9 Inch Nails. And I would just, every time I'd listen to that song, I would play the story in my mind. And that had been going on for years, since college. And then I think I released The Savior's Champion, or I started The Savior's Champion when I was about 28, 29. So a long time after college. And I was listening to the song and I thought, man, it's too bad that this doesn't actually exist. Like, this story doesn't actually exist and people could experience it. And then I thought, oh my gosh, Jenna, you are so stupid. You're a writer. Like, you could make the story exist. Come on. Why did it take me so long to figure that out? I don't know. But basically, when I was in the car listening to the song, I was like, oh my gosh, I should write a book about this. And that's how it happened. I started outlining it that day. It took me like 2 weeks to outline, and then I started writing the book.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that trips a lot of writers up is you have an idea in your head, and you talked about like a mental music video. You're listening to music, the story's kind of effortlessly playing through your head. And then as soon as you sit down and you start writing the actual words, sometimes you're like, oh, these words hit hard. This is good. But other times, it's like it doesn't feel like it's quite lining up with what you imagined. I guess that's sort of where writer's block comes from, but maybe there's just also a frustration in kind of converting ideas into reality. Like when I know you've been writing for a long time, but like, was that ever originally a struggle for you, or has it kind of always been innate where you're kind of able to just express yourself through writing?
Well, I've always, had like a natural inclination toward writing, but what a lot of people forget is it's called the rough draft for a reason. It's going to be rough. A lot of people just assume that certain writers certain successful writers, they just put the story on the page and it's perfect as is. You have to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to write some garbage, but at least you've got something to work with. You can mold the garbage into art. So for me, it's very common for me to, write the story or write a chapter. And I'm like, I know that everything I wrote is terrible. It's just bad. It's just not good. But the point is, I can fix that later. Just get it on the page. And eventually, through all the editing process, I will mold it into the story that I see in my head. So it is a very common feeling, but it's not as serious as a lot of writers make it. They think this is only happening to me. Like, oh, why am I not more like Stephen King? It's like, I'm sure it happens to Stephen King too. It happens to everyone. It's not going to be perfect the moment it comes out of your fingertips on the keyboard. You just get it down. Put that pile of poo on your computer screen, and then through the various stages of editing, you'll be able to make it shine. You'll be able to turn it into the book or the image that you see in your head, but you got to give yourself permission to suck at first. Just suck for a little while. It'll get better. Just keep writing.
Yeah, and I think even just making progress can instill you with morale.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just sitting there and your cursor's blinking and nothing quite seems right, every word feels like garbage, you'll just keep getting in your own head. But if you just kind of keep writing and the story unfolds, even if it's bad, when you have a bullet point that goes from here to here to here to here, then you at least have like a skeleton, as you said, to work with. Because,
Exactly.
I don't write books, but I've written hundreds of scripts for videos. They're basically kind of, a boring way of putting it is video essays about video games. But the amount of garbage I've written that just needed to be edited, or I needed somebody else to take a look at it because I had read it so many times I don't even know what I'm reading anymore. It's just kind of it's all part of the process. You just gotta put some poop down and it's all gonna be okay.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, writers have to remember you're not going through this process alone, or at least you shouldn't. You're going to have critique partners. You're going to have beta readers. You absolutely have to have professional editors. People are going to help you, So when people are very like, oh my gosh, everything I'm writing is crappy, it's like, it's okay. At least you are writing something and you can fix it and make it not crappy. But you can't edit a blank page. So just get something down.
And so did you, this is, I guess, a slight 180, but did you feel like there was a frustration with we'll call it the writing community or whatever you want to call it, that sort of inspired you to make a lot of videos? Because, I mean, you have a lot of like top 10 worst tropes, or here's the worst writing advice I've heard and why it's garbage, and listen to me instead. Like, was there sort of years and years of building frustration that sort of contributed to this channel? I'm curious about that.
I wouldn't say frustration, but just, I mean, there is one thing in particular that frustrates me, and that's especially right now. I'd say for like ever since the early 2000s, there's been a trend, particularly in writing romances and really romanticizing unhealthy, abusive characteristics. So, you know, I'm sure you can think of a bunch of books and movies that do this, but like, oh, he's stalking me because he loves me, or oh, he's violent and he takes what he wants and that's sexy. And it's like, no, actually, that sounds like a predator, you know, and there's a lot of that's romanticized in the industry, and I write romance. And so one of my biggest goals for my channel is, can we make healthy romance popular instead? Can we go that route? And a lot of people, the way they counteract that is they say like, well, healthy romance isn't exciting. And it's kind of like, if you think someone needs to be abused in order for the relationship to be exciting, then that's a you problem. Your perspective is way off. The healthy romance is, in my opinion, the most exciting because you can actually root for the characters. You want them to get together because they're so good together. So that is a frustration I've had with the writing community that I'm trying to channel into positive action to help promote more healthy romances. Even if you're not writing in the romance genre, if you just have a romantic subplot, which is extremely common across all genres to have a romantic subplot. It's like, can we normalize not romanticizing abusive characteristics, please and thank you. But in terms of the other videos, it's not so much a frustration, but more so correcting misinformation, because there's a lot of misinformation that gets spread over and over again. I've been involved in lots of writing communities and lots of groups, and you keep seeing the same not so factual facts being promoted. And so for me, it's like, well, I have this large platform. A lot of people are listening. At least I can hopefully make positive change toward putting the actual correct information out. Whether or not people, you know, want to watch or want to believe me, that's totally up to them. But at least I did my part to say, hey guys, this isn't actually how the writing industry is. You know, it hopefully helps save someone's, you know, writing career in the future.
Mm-hmm. So about the whole abusive relationships being popular in novels, I find that fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of horrifying, but it's also fascinating. Why do you think so many people have thought over the years that healthy relationships are boring? Like, what is I guess, what does that say about society? But more importantly, why do you think that is?
I have a few theories. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, but
you don't have to be nice.
Well, I rarely am. No, but I do think a lot of it comes down to the author. It's a lot of the authors usually projecting some of their own preferences and fetishes and things like that. There have been interviews with authors. I don't want to say names because I'm not trying to drag anyone, but there have been interviews with authors where they were asked specifically, like, why did you go that kind of abusive route? And they would say things like, like outdated opinions, like, well, if a woman, like, for example, if a woman wants to have sex and is very eager to have sex, she's seen as a slut. So in this case, if doesn't give consent, but he takes it, it can be sexy without making her look like a slut. That was something that I've seen in an interview, and I'm like thinking, girl, this is not the 50s. Like, it's, you know, that's very old fashioned mentality. That's, you know, and it's bringing ideals and opinions that maybe aren't personally healthy for that author, and you're popularizing it for your audience. So you're taking a personal problem you have, you know, a worry for slut shaming that you have in your own, you know, mind, and you are popularizing it for other people. And when it comes to adult romances and, you know, like erotica and things like that, I feel like at least the audience is adult and they can make their own, opinions about whether or not this is healthy. But it really, really bothers me when this stuff is written into young adult novels. Young adult novels are written for ages 12 to 18. So there are literal children reading these books. And I've met a lot of girls who said, I read such and such popular novel and I thought, well, that's how romance is supposed to be. And because of that, I ended up in several abusive relationships because I thought that's what romance was. Yeah, and I've talked to multiple women who said, I really, really am striving toward, promoting healthy romances in fiction because reading unhealthy romances really had a negative personal effect on my life. So yeah, I would just encourage writers who are writing romance, maybe think about the effect you're having on your audience, because especially if you're writing for a younger audience, I write for adults, but I am aware that sometimes teenagers read my work, and I try and think about the message that I'm sending and what I'm telling readers. This is okay. You should strive toward this. I don't want to be the person that lands someone in an abusive relationship or kind of gets their mind thinking that's okay.
And thank goodness you feel that way. I feel like that is important. And I think that's one thing that's weird about being in the spotlight in general is like any weird, like we're all messed up on some level, like as some aspect of ourselves could use some work universally. That is just true. And then if you write a popular book or something like that, you are sort of inadvertently just copy pasting your mind into this universe that you've fleshed out. And sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it's less than awesome. I guess there's like a weird responsibility with that where it's like important to be self-aware, but you also don't want to be like so self-aware and self-critical that you're like not even writing what you want to write. I don't know, are there like guidelines that you use to like make sure that if there is a relationship in your book that it's healthy, or even it doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship, just like any friends interacting, like what to you are like the most important aspects of good relationship in a book, even if it's platonic?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to recognize that, just there's a difference between romanticizing an unhealthy relationship, whether it's platonic or romantic. There's a difference between romanticizing it and writing it. It's totally fine to write unhealthy relationships in books so long as you're presenting them that way. I have plenty of unhealthy relationships, both friendships that are like super toxic. I have unhealthy romantic relationships that are super toxic, but they're presented as toxic. It's, you read it and this is bad. I'm not saying that it's cool and we love it. We love to see it. It's not like that. So I want to make that clear first and foremost. But in terms of the healthy relationships, one thing is open communication. The ability to feel vulnerable with another person, I think, is really important in any kind of close relationship, whether it's friendship, family, or romantic. I think it's important to have, you need to be able to feel vulnerable with that person and know that you're safe doing so. So for me, that's a really easy way to show an unhealthy relationship. If one person is vulnerable with the other person and then they just handle it totally like crap, like that, it's like, okay, that's not the healthiest relationship. That's a really good way to show that. Obviously, trust is really important. And I think another thing that a lot of people kind of misconstrue is equality is extremely important in any kind of close relationship. However, that does not mean sameness. That does not mean they are exactly the same. They make this exact same income. They have the exact same, like status in life. They're both funny and they're both hot. It doesn't mean they are identical. It just means they bring equal strengths and equal weaknesses to the table. So, for example, if one of them is at a higher class, a higher status level, that might be considered a strength being brought to the relationship. The other person needs to have another strength that they're bringing to the relationship. So I would go through your characters and say, how many good traits does this person have? It should be the same number of good traits the other person has. And same with baggage, because no one's perfect. And that's another thing. A lot of people think that writing a healthy relationship, these people need to be perfect. They never mess up. They never fight. That's just completely unrealistic. Everyone fights. Everyone disagrees. It happens. It's all in how you handle those disagreements, how you handle those fights, that you're not taking it to a really crappy place, and that you're able to apologize and move forward and change your behavior. And like I said, making sure that both parties have an equal amount of baggage, because we're all messed up. We all got demons. We all got problems, and books thrive on conflict. So you need that for your fiction. But you just want to make sure one person isn't just a total disaster and then the other person has no problems at all. You want to make sure that they're carrying equal strengths and weaknesses into the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I feel like that's a really balanced, important perspective, because maybe that's why people feel that healthy relationships are boring, is they feel like you're trying too hard to set a good example or something. But
Right.
what you said about acknowledging that this is toxic, but you're still telling the story of a toxic relationship, it's just kind of more clear that this is morally ambiguous, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think another reason people say, oh, healthy relationships are boring, is because they assume that means perfection, people who don't fight, people who everything's great. Stories and plots are all about conflict. So especially if you are writing a romance as opposed to a romantic subplot, if you're writing a romance, there's going to be a conflict in the relationship. That's inevitable. And you can still make it a healthy relationship. I mean, I have a healthy relationship with my fiance, and we still bicker. We fight every once in a while. It happens. There's gonna be miscommunication. There's gonna be people upsetting other people. Usually in romance books, the conflict ends in a breakup and then they get back together. It doesn't have to be perfect and, sunshine and rainbows to be a healthy relationship. It's all about how they handle those mistakes, how they bounce back, and if they're willing to apologize and improve.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So, one thing I've found with writing, or really just creating anything in general, is life experience is important. And that doesn't mean, I don't know, like, do you feel like you've kind of throughout your life gone out of your way to live your best life, so to speak, and that has helped you kind of express yourself in more interesting ways? Because there's definitely been periods of my life where I spend too much time by myself in a dark room, just kind of quietly working. And then at some point, somewhere along the way, I kind of like run out of juice or something. Have you kind of tried your best to explore and experience new experiences?
I wouldn't say that I have tried my best to do so, but I do think I've had a lot of experiences that have improved me as a writer. A lot of it, this is going to sound so depressing, but a lot of it comes down to like trauma, like having experienced a lot of, less desirable things. I think it makes writing emotional moments a lot more believable. So for example, I have PTSD and my characters have PTSD. I'm not saying that you need to have PTSD to write PTSD, but it does make it easier because you've experienced it yourself. It's a lot easier to write anything that you've actually experienced. So I've fallen in love. It's easier for me to write about falling in love. And that doesn't mean you want to put yourself into the story. Like, you don't want to write a self-insert. That's awkward and cringy. But drawing from life experiences, it makes it easier for you to understand where your characters are coming from. If you have lost a loved one, it's going to be a lot easier to write about a character losing a loved one because you can relate and you understand how it feels. So I don't necessarily think people need to like go out and live their best life, but I do think experience helps significantly with writing. And in particular, it helps significantly with creating characters and writing relationships, whether they're friendship, family, foe, whatever. It helps the most with that. And I like to make that distinction because a lot of people say, a lot of people don't like the phrase, write what you know, because they're like, well, then how am I supposed to write about werewolves? Werewolves don't even exist. I've never met a werewolf. It's like, that's not really what they're saying. No one knows a magician. No one knows what it's like to be a vampire or a werewolf. At least I don't think so. It just means that it's a lot easier to write those, character types, to build three-dimensional characters when you have experienced, a lot of, emotional growth throughout your own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some people, especially, if you're like a teenager or late teens, early 20s, kind of that age, and you're thinking of writing your first book or starting that YouTube channel, there can be a sort of romanticization of fame or success where you feel like your life hasn't started until you achieve that success. But it's kind of the opposite in a lot of ways. I think it's like you want to just live your life and have meaningful relationships and just kind of do things and experience, like do your best to navigate life and cultivate love as best as possible. And in doing that, you're just going to kind of gain life experience, even though it sounds kind of mundane, but it's very true. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. And I think the more that you're willing to focus on your foundations as like a person and sort of making sure that you are dealing with any trauma you have, or just making sure that you call your mom if you have a decent relationship with your mom. Even just like simple things like this, I think can sort of like instill something in you that actually ends up helping you in the long run create, whether it's a novel or a YouTube channel. It can help you create things because you actually know what it takes to maintain good relationships.
Exactly. And a lot of people, like, I'll get a lot of questions like, how do I write a funny character? And I'll be like, well, what do you find funny? And it's like they never considered, they'll be like, I want to write a really like grumpy character, but I don't know how to express it. And I'm like, well, when you talk to people who you find grumpy, how does it come across? Like, that's the thing, is a lot of people, they're overcomplicating the writing process. A lot of what it takes to be a writer is just pay attention to the world around you. Like, if you don't know how to write a grumpy character, you've been grumpy yourself. You've met grumpy people. What does it look like? Pay attention, and a lot of what it takes to be a writer is just paying attention and then replicating it in your writing. Like, people are always confused about how to write certain characters and certain relationships. And it's like, you see people in your life all the time. Pay attention to how they behave. And that'll give you an idea of how you can reflect it in your own work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of amazing how useful just being present is. Like, it's useful in just your everyday life, but then just noticing these things that maybe you normally wouldn't take mental notes of. Yeah, it's interesting how often like real life characters do exist, even though it's not. It's like aspects of people can be really weird, but not necessarily them as a whole. They may not be a super interesting character overall, but as you said, like the grumpy character, somebody may, when they get grumpy, some people when they're grumpy are hilarious. Yeah. They just like, I don't know, their filter goes away. They're more honest in a way. Like so for instance, I despise the city of Los Angeles. Every time I'm in LA, I'm very grumpy. I'm always making fun of it. I'm always talking shit on it. Mm-hmm. And my friends are always just laughing, and they love it. They love LA Grant. And so it's just kind of, I guess I've taken a mental note of that, of like, what does it mean to be grumpy? Right. And Los Angeles. Yeah. That is what being grumpy means to me.
I completely agree with that sentiment, but I'm from NorCal, so I've got a bias. We've got the rivalry.
As am I.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, LA sucks.
yeah, it does. It's the worst.
It really is.
Oh, seriously, yeah. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. Otherwise, I'll talk about it for like an hour. But so okay, like. This is maybe kind of a trite question, but what is like the most important piece of writing advice, would you say? Like, I think sometimes you're good at simplifying things and kind of just talking about what is actually important. So if there's somebody, they just need a little nudge to just to sit down and start pressing buttons on a keyboard, what do you tell them?
There are three things. Two of them are going to sound technical and stupid, but or mundane, I guess. But these are huge mistakes that so many writers make. So that's why I have to mention it. But the first one is more philosophical. Write the story you want to read. Not necessarily the story you want to write, although what you want to read and what you want to write usually overlap. But write the story you want to read. And that's because you will have passion for it. It's important to you. Also, there is a readership for it because you want to read it. If you want to read it, other people probably want to read it. You are not a special snowflake. You are not as unique as you think you are. If you want to read it, other people probably want to read it. And the passion that you will feel for that story will bleed through the pages. It makes the reading experience so much better. So don't write the book that you think you're supposed to write. Write the book you want to read. It's going to make the process a lot easier. The second thing, hire a professional editor. Okay, you are not special and different and unique. You are not a perfect writer. A lot of people are like, well, I'm really good at proofreading, so I know there's no spelling errors. I don't care. Hire a professional editor. That's what they're there for. If you don't have your book properly edited, you are releasing an unfinished book. That's just plain and simple, okay? And then the last thing is, oh my gosh, please research and learn story structure. Your book, all books, fiction books specifically, have to have some kind of plot, and plot follows a structure. That structure is inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. That is the simplified structure that literally all fiction follows. There are, more complex versions of this, like the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, saves the cat, all that good stuff. You can look into those as well. But the point is, please be familiar with at least inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. At least familiarize yourself with that and be sure to follow that when you are crafting your story, because without a structure, you do not have a plot. Without a plot, you don't have a story. And I know that sounds like a mundane point of advice, but I would say at least 75% of the newbie writers I meet have no idea what structure is, and then their story goes nowhere and they have to completely rewrite it and start over.
Wow. So when it comes to hiring a professional editor, I think some people maybe hesitate because maybe part of it's ego. They just want to be, I write perfectly all the time. I don't need an editor. But maybe a bigger part is just they're worried that somebody's going to try to gut their book or something. How do you know if an editor is right for you? Like, do you have any advice on choosing one? Is it as simple as just kind of throwing money at somebody and hoping that it works out? And if they do a bad job, you hire somebody else? Like, what does it take to figure that out?
Well, first of all, if you're writing a book, period, an editor is right for you. You absolutely have to have one. But also, people who are worried about their book being gutted, there are different types of editors. And while you are supposed to go through every round of edits, and I hesitate to say this because this is just gonna, make people feel validated to do this. But usually the more experienced you become as a writer, you start to, I guess, kind of innately do some of this in your own self-editing, because like I said, there's different steps to editors. So the more experienced you become as a writer, you might be able to get away with skipping some of these professional edits, but certainly not all of them. The steps of professional edits are the developmental edit, which is gutting the book. It's basically the person going through your story itself and telling you your climax is weak. You need to up the climax, or this book has sagging middle syndrome, which is where the middle of the book is really boring. They're going through and critiquing the story itself and telling you how to improve it. The next edit is the line edit, which is all on a sentence and paragraph level. So they'll tell you you're repeating the same sentence structure over and over again. It's really boring, or all of your sentences are way too long, or your paragraphs are choppy. It's going through your writing on that sort of level. And then the last one is the copy edit. And that is the nuts and bolts, the grammar, punctuation, that sort of thing. I recommend going through all three of these. But if you are super scared about, someone completely changing your story, that's the only place where you're going to need to worry about that is the developmental edit. And if you are mostly worried that your grammar is terrible, that's what the copy edit is for. So basically, when you get a better idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are, it'll make it easier for you to kind of go through the editing process and pick and choose who your editors are, because you can hone in. Like, I know a lot of people who are terrible with commas. So for them, the copy edit is the most important part, because that's exactly what copy editors do. So I think it's important, like I said, to educate yourself on these different steps of the process and hone in on which ones are going to matter the most to you. I don't recommend skipping the developmental edit. I know even if you're scared about your book getting gutted, it can be a real eye-opener. And usually editors are not there to rewrite the book for you. They're just going to tell you the issues that they see and how they think you should fix it. So even if you're hiring someone and they find a whole bunch of issues in your book, you don't have to do everything they say, and they're not going to do it for you. So it's not like you're going to get your manuscript back and it's completely rewritten and your voice has been removed. They're going to tell you what's wrong with it and then have you fix it. So you can at least, make changes, but still keep them authentic to yourself.
That makes sense. Like there's still a decent amount of wiggle room for you to kind of interpret the notes that you get back and to apply the advice as you see fit.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's your book. You're in the driver's seat. I wouldn't recommend just disregarding all of your editor's notes, but it's inevitable that you're going to get at least a couple notes that you're like, I don't think that's right. They're human beings as well, so you're not going to agree on everything. And if you don't like one of their notes, you don't have to do it.
So I wanted to bring this up because I think it's funny, and it's very common in movies. And you also mentioned this earlier, is the idea of the shoehorned romantic subplot. I don't know how or why this got so popular. I guess there's always the mystique of going on an adventure and meeting the love of your life, and then you accomplish a big goal, and then they fall in love with you, and you live happily ever after. Like, I get it. I get the appeal. It makes sense. But like, what is that? Like, what the romantic subplot that gets shoehorned in? I'm like, I noticed it. I was probably like 15 when I first noticed it, and it started annoying me then. It still kind of annoys me now. Like, it's kind of obvious when it feels shoehorned or forced. Where do you think the shoehorned romantic subplot comes from? And how do you avoid that?
Well, where it comes from is, honestly, it's all business and money. Romance is the #1 most popular fiction genre by miles. It like totally eclipses all the other genres. Now, obviously, a romantic subplot is not a romance, it's just a subplot. But basically, if you add romance to any story, not any story, but most stories. If you add romance to most stories, it can help be, a bigger money booster, because romance is the most popular genre. It's shoehorned in when the characters don't really have chemistry. You're just like, they're together because I say so, like if they don't have any chemistry, it's shoehorned in. And also, if the romance has absolutely nothing to do with the plot. So the easiest way to avoid this issue is to make sure that usually it's going to be involving a main character and a love interest. The main character is obviously relevant to the plot because that's why they're the main character. Make sure the love interest has some kind of role beyond being the love interest. Make sure that they are pivotal and relevant to the plot itself. So one example I like to give is, say your story is about a prince who his kingdom was stolen from him and he wants to get it back. Maybe his love interest ends up being a mercenary that he hires to help him fight to get his kingdom back. So now that love interest is someone who is pivotal to the story because they're the mercenary that he hired to help him get his kingdom back. Even if you were to remove the love aspect of their relationship, that character is still important to the main plot. So that's the easiest way to avoid shoehorning in a romantic subplot, is make the love interest matter for more than just like heart tingles and, horniness. they gotta be more. They gotta be more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess, that I was never quite able to articulate it. But you've done a fantastic job. I feel like you've sort of clarified this thing that's been in the back of my mind for well over a decade now. So thank you. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I guess, I don't know. People People do love romance, huh? I didn't realize that romance was the biggest genre by far. So
yeah, it's funny because a lot of people make fun of romance writers because, you know, it's cheesy and all that good stuff. But I always say romance writers are drying their tears with their $100 bills. Like they're crying all the way to the bank, you know? So it is the most popular genre by a landslide. So a lot of people feel eager to shoehorn in a romantic subplot because they're like, it'll help me boost sales. It's a good marketing tactic. And it is a good marketing tactic if the romantic subplot is good. But if it's shoehorned in, it's going to be crappy and people are just going to make fun of it and you'll be embarrassed.
Right on. Well, we've almost hit the 1 hour mark. These things go by quickly. I don't know how this happens. Time is weird. But why don't you tell people like where they can find you, pitch all the things you want to pitch, and be shameless.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, if you guys want to check out my YouTube channel, Writing with Jenna Moreci, it's at youtube.com/Jenna Moreci. That's Moreci. You can find me all over social media at Jenna Moreci. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, all those good places. I'm also available on BookBub if you want to know about all of my upcoming releases right when they happen. BookBub is the place to go. And of course, you got to check out my books. You got to do it. It's mandatory. The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister are dark fantasy romance novels, and they're available all over the place. So at all major book retailers, you can get them there, and you can get them in hardback, paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
Right on. Thank you so much, Jenna.
Thank you.
And it's been great talking to you. Like I kind of tell a lot of people this, at least the interesting ones, that I always love kind of figuring out how their mind works and sort of everybody's got their own niche. And getting the perspective of a fantasy author has been really, really fascinating to me.
Awesome. I'm glad. This was super fun.
Yeah. And make sure to like and subscribe or whatever platform you're on, whoever you are watching, listening to this, and you won't regret it. I'll see you in the next one. And thanks again, Jenna.
Thanks.